The morning sun cast long shadows across the red carpet at Westminster Abbey on the 29th of April 2011. Millions of eyes around the world watched as Catherine Middleton stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, her ivory satin dress catching the light like moonbeams on water. Prince William waited inside, adjusting his red military tunic for what seemed like the 100th time that morning. When Catherine entered the Abbey, walking the long aisle with her father Michael, something extraordinary happened. The moment William caught sight of her, his entire demeanor shifted. His younger brother Harry, standing beside him, whispered something, and William's response wasn't heard by anyone except those closest to him. But the world saw his face transform. The nervous energy that had consumed him all morning melted away, replaced by an expression of pure wonder. As Catherine approached, William's eyes never left her face. When she finally reached him at the altar, before a single word was spoken, they shared a look that photographers would later describe as the most intimate moment ever captured in such a public setting. No words were exchanged, but in that brief eye contact, volumes were spoken. The slight upturn of Catherine's lips, barely visible beneath her veil, and the way William's shoulders relaxed, told a story of two people finding their anchor in each other amidst the overwhelming grandeur of the occasion. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the ceremony, but for those watching closely, the real communication continued in silence. When William struggled to place the ring on Catherine's finger, she gave him the smallest nod of encouragement. Her fingers steadied his trembling hands, and in that touch, broadcast to billions, the world saw not a prince and his bride, but two young people supporting each other through one of life's most significant moments. During the exchange of vows, something remarkable occurred. As William promised to love and cherish Catherine, a single tear rolled down her cheek. She made no move to wipe it away, and William, seeing it, broke protocol ever so slightly. He reached out with his thumb and gently brushed it away. The gesture lasted less than a second, but photographers captured it, and within minutes, the image circled the globe. Social media exploded with comments about this tender moment that spoke louder than any royal proclamation ever could. The ceremony continued with readings and hymns, but the couple's silent dialogue never ceased. During the signing of the register, away from the main congregation but still visible to cameras, they shared a private joke. Catherine's eyes crinkled with suppressed laughter, and William's hand briefly touched the small of her back. Royal watchers noted this was unusual for such a formal occasion, but it humanized them in a way that carefully scripted speeches never could. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Catherine's train flowing behind her like a river of silk, they faced the doors that would open to reveal them to the waiting world. In that final moment of relative privacy, William leaned close to his new wife. His lips didn't move much, but lip readers later confirmed he simply said, "You look beautiful." Catherine's response was a squeeze of his hand, her fingers interlacing with his in a grip that photographers noted she maintained until protocol demanded they wave to the crowds. Outside the Abbey, as they climbed into the 1,902 state landau, the couple faced a sea of faces and flags. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but amid the chaos, they created their own quiet bubble. William helped Catherine manage her dress and train with practiced ease, his hands gentle but efficient. She looked up at him with gratitude, and he winked, a private moment caught by long lenses and shared with the world. The procession to Buckingham Palace took them through streets lined with over 1 million well-wishers. Throughout the journey, their non-verbal communication continued. When Catherine seemed overwhelmed by the crowds, William's hand would find hers. When he appeared tense, she would lean slightly toward him, her presence alone seeming to calm him. These micro-moments of connection, invisible to the cheering crowds but captured by cameras, revealed the foundation of their relationship. At Buckingham Palace, as they prepared for the famous balcony appearance, palace staff later reported that the couple stood in the corridor, holding hands in silence. No words were needed. The magnitude of the day, the weight of expectation, the joy of their union, all of it passed between them in that quiet moment before they stepped out to greet the world as the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. When they finally appeared on the balcony, the crowd's roar reached fever pitch. The traditional kiss was expected, but what preceded it was not. William whispered something to Catherine that made her laugh, her hand coming up to partially cover her mouth in a gesture that was both regal and endearingly normal. When he leaned in for the kiss, she met him halfway. And in that brief contact, a nation saw its future. 9 years after their fairy tale wedding, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge stood in the sterile hospital corridor of St. Mary's Hospital in London. The date was the 23rd of March 2020, and the world had just entered an unprecedented global lockdown. Catherine adjusted her blue dress nervously, while William checked his watch. They were about to make their first major public appearance since the pandemic began, visiting NHS workers at the front lines of the crisis. As they entered the emergency department, something shifted in their usual royal protocol. The careful distance typically maintained during official visits vanished, replaced by something more raw and authentic. When they met their first healthcare worker, a young nurse named Sarah, who had been working 20-hour shifts, Catherine's eyes filled with tears she didn't try to hide. William placed his hand on his wife's lower back, a gesture of support that spoke volumes about their shared emotion. The usual format of royal visits involves polite conversation and carefully orchestrated photo opportunities. But this day was different. As they listened to stories of separation from families, of patients dying alone, of the fear that gripped even the most experienced medical professionals, the royal couple's reactions transcended words. William's jaw tightened with each account, his hands clasping and unclasping behind his back. Catherine reached out repeatedly, her hands hovering just short of the embrace she clearly wanted to give, but couldn't due to social distancing rules. In the break room, they sat with exhausted doctors who had been living separately from their families to protect them from infection. One doctor, describing how he hadn't hugged his children in 3 weeks, broke down mid-sentence. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine looked at William, and in that glance, a decision was made. They both leaned forward simultaneously, their body language conveying what words couldn't. That they were not just there as royals performing a duty, but as parents who understood the agony of separation from one's children. William spoke then, his voice thick with emotion, about their own 3 children at home. But it was what happened next that resonated globally. Catherine reached across the table, stopping just short of the doctor's hand, her fingers resting on the table, in a gesture of connection that respected the necessary distance, while communicating profound empathy. Photographers captured the moment, the space between their hands speaking to the strange new world they all inhabited, where human connection had to be reimagined. As they toured the intensive care unit, viewing it through glass windows, they watched nurses in full protective equipment caring for critically ill patients. One nurse looked up and saw them watching. She gave a small wave, and Catherine pressed her hand against the glass in response. William did the same. The image of the future King and Queen of England with their hands against glass, separated from but connected to those fighting on the front lines, became one of the defining images of the pandemic. In the hospital's makeshift command center, where exhausted administrators coordinated the overwhelming response effort, the couple listened to statistics that painted a grim picture. The hospital administrator, explaining how they were converting regular wards to COVID units, suddenly stopped mid-sentence. Overwhelmed. The room fell silent. William and Catherine exchanged a look that lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but communicated an entire conversation. Without words, they seemed to agree that this was not the time for royal platitudes. Catherine moved first, walking to the window that overlooked London. William joined her, and they stood side by side, looking out at a city that had ground to a halt. Their reflection in the window showed 2 people grappling with the enormity of what their country faced. When they turned back to the room, their faces had changed. Gone was the careful royal composure, replaced by a determination that needed no words. The visit was supposed to last an hour. They stayed for 3. As they prepared to leave, they passed through the emergency department again. A new shift had arrived, and word had spread about their presence. Tired healthcare workers lined the corridors, standing at a safe distance. William and Catherine walked slowly between them, making eye contact with each person. No words were exchanged, but Catherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and William's nod to each worker carried the weight of a nation's gratitude. At the exit, they paused. The hospital's chief executive thanked them for coming, for bringing attention to their struggles. Catherine's response was to place both hands over her heart and bow deeply. William did the same. This gesture, unrehearsed and unexpected, caused several of the watching staff to break down in tears. In that moment of silent acknowledgement, the royal couple had communicated more effectively than any speech could have achieved. Outside, they walked to their car through empty streets that would normally be bustling with life. Before getting in, they turned back to look at the hospital. Catherine reached for William's hand, and he took it without hesitation. Press photographers, standing at a distance, captured this moment of two people drawing strength from each other while facing an uncertain future. The image would appear on front pages worldwide the next day, captioned simply, "Together." The September rain fell softly on the grounds of Windsor Castle as mourners filed past in an endless stream. The 19th of September 2022 marked not just the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II, but a moment when the world watched William and Catherine navigate their most challenging public appearance yet. The Prince of Wales stood rigid in his military uniform, while Catherine, now Princess of Wales, wore a black coat dress with the Queen's pearl choker around her neck. Inside St. George's Chapel, before the service began, William stood at his assigned place, his face a mask of controlled emotion. Catherine, positioned according to strict protocol, caught his eye across the aisle. In that brief moment of connection, his composure cracked slightly. She gave him the smallest of nods, a gesture so subtle that only those who knew them well would recognize it as her way of saying, "I'm here. You're not alone." His shoulders, which had been pulled tight with tension, relaxed marginally. As the coffin was carried into the chapel, William's role as a senior royal demanded he remain stoic. But Catherine, watching from her position, saw what others might miss. The way his fingers trembled slightly as they gripped his ceremonial sword, the muscle jumping in his jaw as he fought for control. When the coffin passed by them, she broke protocol in the smallest way, shifting her position just enough that her shoulder briefly touched his arm. The contact lasted less than a second, but William's breathing, which had become shallow, deepened noticeably. During the Archbishop's homily about service and duty, cameras caught a moment that would resonate worldwide. As the Archbishop spoke about the Queen's role as a grandmother, William's eyes found his wife's. Catherine, tears flowing freely down her cheeks, made no attempt to hide her grief. In that shared gaze, the world saw not the Prince and Princess of Wales, but a grandson mourning his beloved grandmother and a wife supporting her husband through unimaginable loss. The most powerful moment came during the singing of "The Lord's My Shepherd," known to be one of the Queen's favorite hymns. William's voice, usually strong during such occasions, faltered. Catherine, standing beside their children, Prince George and Princess Charlotte, placed her hand gently on Charlotte's shoulder, while her eyes never left her husband's face. Her lips moved silently, not singing but appearing to mouth words of encouragement to William. He saw her, straightened his spine, and found his voice again. When young Princess Charlotte, overwhelmed by the solemnity of the occasion, began to cry quietly, the world watched as Catherine bent down to comfort her daughter. But it was William's reaction that spoke volumes. Unable to leave his position, he could only watch as his wife handled the situation with grace. The look that passed between them, his gratitude, her reassurance, required no words. She had seamlessly taken on the role of both parents in that moment, allowing him to fulfill his duty while ensuring their children were comforted. As the service progressed, the couple's 9-year-old son, Prince George, standing between his parents, began to show signs of distress. The weight of the occasion, the watching world, the understanding that he was now second in line to the throne. It was overwhelming for a child. William, constrained by protocol and position, could not move to comfort his son. But Catherine could. She placed her hand on George's shoulder, and then, in a move that broke strict funeral protocol, she looked directly at William and nodded toward their son. Understanding immediately, William made a small gesture with his hand, a private signal they had clearly used before. George, seeing his father's gesture, straightened up, drawing strength from this silent paternal encouragement. The interaction, lasting mere seconds, showed a family unit working in perfect synchronization, even in their darkest hour. Near the end of the service, as the congregation prepared for the final hymn, an elderly relative stumbled slightly while returning to their seat. Both William and Catherine moved instinctively to help, then caught themselves, remembering protocol. Their eyes met across the space, and in that shared moment of suppressed instinct, there was something almost like humor, a brief lightness in the heavy atmosphere that seemed to say, "Even now, we're still us." As the coffin was carried out of the chapel for the journey to its final resting place, the royal family followed in procession. William walked with his father, while Catherine shepherded their children. But just before exiting the chapel, in full view of the global television audience, William paused almost imperceptibly. He turned his head just enough to catch Catherine's eye one more time. She gave him the same small nod she had at the beginning, a bookend of support that held him through the service. Outside, as they walked behind the hearse for the short journey to the committal service, the rain had stopped, and weak September sunshine broke through the clouds. Prince George stumbled slightly on the uneven ancient stones, and William, walking ahead, tensed visibly. But Catherine was there, steadying their son with a gentle hand. William's relief was visible in the way his stride became more confident, trusting his wife to handle what he could not. At the committal service, as the Queen's coffin was lowered into the royal vault, the moment came for the most personal goodbye. William stepped forward to place the Prince of Wales's banner on the coffin. His hand shook visibly as he released it, and for a moment, he stood frozen, overwhelmed by the finality of the moment. Catherine, maintaining her position with the children, caught his eye. Her lips moved in what lip readers later confirmed was simply, "Well done." Those two words, silent across the space of the ancient chapel, gave him what he needed. He stepped back, rejoined the line, and when the service concluded, he walked with renewed purpose. As the royal family filed out, beginning their new chapter in a world without its longest reigning monarch, William and Catherine's children walked between them. Without discussion or planning, the parents reached for their children's hands at the same moment, creating an unbroken chain of connection. The image of that moment, the new Prince and Princess of Wales with their children, united in grief but strong in their unity, became the defining photograph of a historic day. No words were needed to convey the message. The monarchy would continue, built on the foundation of family, duty, and the quiet strength found in partnership. As they walked into their future, the space between them hummed with unspoken communication, a silent dialogue that had sustained them through their darkest hour and would carry them forward into whatever came next.